Hi, this is Jeneen Miller, and you are watching Pieces of Victory. Today we have on our show Jordan von Erickson. He is a survivor of a lockdown residential program called Spring Creek Lodge Academy that was located in Montana. It closed its doors finally in 2009 due to 353 lawsuits of sightings of child abuse. No one was prosecuted, and yet they're free to rebrand and abuse more children today. Jordan is an activist against child abuse in teen programs. He has a podcast called Straight Outta BS podcast. You can find that on YouTube. He is also a composer and a writer, and he writes about what happened to him in the troubled teen industry and about what his life is like today. He is a brave young man, and he is here today to tell you how he took his trauma and turned it around and created something beautiful with music, with lyrics, and helping other survivors cope with the aftermath. He also dealt with substance abuse and how he used substance abuse to cope with the trauma that he dealt with, and how he recovered, and how he could use that today to help someone else who is in the same situation. Please welcome to the show, Jordan von Erickson. Hi, Jordan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Wonderful. Welcome to the show, Pieces of Victory. It's so nice to have you on my show. Do you want to start from the beginning of, I know you were locked up at a lockdown residential program called Spring Creek Lodge Academy. And that was located where? Do you want to tell the story of how your parents locked you in? Why don't you start from the beginning of what possessed them to lock you up in a reform school? I'm assuming it's a reform school.
Okay. Well, I actually, I do have the letter. I don't know exactly where it is right now, but I have the letter saying exactly why they sent me there. But essentially, it was, I was running away from home, stealing. I started smoking weed, started drinking alcohol. I wasn't really spending that much time at home, and my grades were sliding. So that's their reason for sending me there. It was located in Thompson Falls, Montana, which is a little, like, 2-horse town. Like, it's just like everybody knows everybody. It's a little dinky town, and it's about 30 miles from that town, up in the wilderness. And so my parents initially tricked me into going there. They said that we were going to check out this school, and I was really tired from the night before. I had spent hanging out with my friends and partying and whatnot, so I didn't sleep like the whole night, so I was really tired. So I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I got in the car, and I remember waking up like 2 or 3 different times, and we still weren't where we were headed. And I was like, where are we actually going? And they were like, oh, we're going to check out the school, like we told you. And they're like, just go back to sleep, it'll be okay. And so, like, we finally get to this, and it was hella snowy when we got there, and we pull up into this driveway. There's a long driveway going up to it. And I thought that it was like a ski resort when I first got there. I was like, oh shit, are we going skiing?
Oh.
And then they're like, no, we're not going skiing. This is the school we're going to check out. And I'm like, oh, you know, I didn't really know what to think at first. And we pulled up to this trailer that they call Staff Central, walked up in there with my parents, and then they took me into this like back room. And they were like, do you know why you're here? And I was like, no, not really. And they were like, well, you're here because you're a bad kid, and you did all this like horrible stuff to your parents, and like they're at their wits' end with you, and you know you're gonna have to graduate from this program now. And then my parents came in, and they're like, yeah, we're sorry, you're gonna have to graduate and all of that. And then
how old were you at this
point?
I
was 16. That's
the year I was locked up as well. Can you tell me why? It sounds like you were self-medicating with alcohol. And
no.
What?
I had just started experimenting with alcohol. I wasn't really.
So you weren't self-medicating at all? It was more experimental?
Yeah, it was really more experimental before the program, yeah.
At all at that time when you were experimenting, or no?
Did I what?
Were you depressed at all the time when you were experimenting?
Not that I can remember. I mean, maybe a little like under the surface, but nothing like that was like that was like visible that like was actually really affecting me at that point. I hadn't really like been introspective at that point in my life to the point where I was actually dealing with a reasonable amount of depression.
Do you think it was internal? Internal?
Yeah, I definitely had some trauma. I mean, growing up, my parents were a little bit physically abusive. My mom, more in particular. There's an incident I don't really want to go into, but let's just say that there was physical abuse involved, some head trauma, and I love my mom to death and everything, and I love my dad to death. I know I was a difficult child, but I do know that there was some trauma from that, and then also my grandma dying when I was like, I think 10, and then I was raped at 7. So I definitely had some trauma, but it wasn't like on the surface, if that makes sense.
Right.
At that point.
That's fine, but is it fair to say that perhaps maybe you were reaching to substance, yes, experimenting, but also as a means to escape from the trauma subconsciously?
Yeah, definitely subconsciously.
Subconsciously.
Definitely.
I'm thinking. And I wanted to dig a little bit more about your past. I wanted to dig more about the parent relationship that you did have, or maybe the lack thereof. And maybe, just maybe, if you were in therapy, I don't know if they took you to therapy and that didn't work, or what happened. Any therapy prior?
Also, I want to point out I was adopted at birth, so I know for a fact that there was some trauma from that, and definitely subconsciously at that point. That's a really good way to put it. But
any therapy?
Yeah, therapy. They had taken me to a few therapists. I was seeing a doctor pretty much from the age of like 5 because of my ADHD, and they had me see a psychiatrist or whatever that, kind of put me in a therapy session and or a therapy setting and see like how I act and whatnot. They do experiments and whatnot, and then they put me in an actual. They took me to an actual therapist after I told them about being raped and whatnot, and they were trying to, because when I got raped, I believe, like, they never really fully believed me. I mean, what happened initially was I was raped by my babysitter. It took me about 2 years to even realize that that wasn't a normal thing. Like, that wasn't like a rite of passage that everybody goes through. Because I was so confused. I was 7 years old, so I didn't know. I thought maybe this was like happened to every kid, and that this is just like normal. So by the time I realized what had happened to me, there obviously wasn't any DNA evidence left on me because it had been 2 years. And so all they did was went and asked him, hey, did you do this? He's like, no. And then instantly they just said, oh, well then, I guess we're not going to look into it. So I never really felt like my parents believed me or like protected me. I wanted to, like, at that point, I wanted my parents to like kind of coddle me and be like, like, screw that. We're going to go, like, we're going to make sure that this person, like, pays for what they did and da-da-da-da. Not even like, in a physical sense, but just like, I wanted to feel like I was protected. I wanted to feel like you actually believed me and that, there was actually going to be action taken, like at least taken to court, like something like.
I agree wholeheartedly. You don't need to get physical with somebody and retaliate that way as a parent. Just to be on an emotional support system for your child is everything to your kid. And now the kid is feeling abandoned. You're probably feeling abandoned at this point. Who can I turn to? If you can't turn to your parents, who can you turn to? And so you probably feel alone at this point. And
I started running away too, because I didn't feel like they believed me, and I didn't want to be there because they didn't believe me. Like, I didn't want to be somewhere where I was like considered a liar. Like, they didn't call me a liar, but that's how I felt.
Well, in essence, they did. They did. And I'm speaking from experience, and it's very hurtful, and you feel abandoned, you feel alienated from your parents, you feel untrustworthy. It's not a good feeling to have this. So I would say for sure you were self-medicating and reaching out maybe to friends, maybe the wrong crowd, and then you were getting in the trouble. We all make choices, but you're also a kid. You're trying to deal with this. You're trying to cope. Any did the therapist try to get your family involved as a whole family dynamic? I'm just curious, and confront your parents and say, "Hey, why don't you believe your child?" I'm trying to dig here because I'm trying to get to the root of the problem before we get into this reform school, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I mean, initially, like, the therapist kind of was going along taking my parents' side. Like, he didn't, they told him that, like, we looked, essentially, they were like, we looked into this. We had the police go there. He said he didn't do it. So he was on their team kind of thing. Like, he was like, oh, okay, they already looked into it. They already covered their bases type thing. So he was more like prying at me about, like, how did that make you feel? Da 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 da. Like, not really trying to, like, pursue any, like, sort of, like, get any closure. He was more about, like, how did it feel? Like, are you acting out towards others? Like, he was, like, asking me if I was acting out towards others because I was raped. Like, was I getting sexual with other people? And I was like, no. But obviously at that point, I was so confused with my sexuality because I was like, at that point at 7, I initially started puberty because, like, my brain, like, everything started firing because of the whole sexual experience type thing. I don't know. I was really sexualized after that. So he was more talking to me, like, making me feel shameful for having, like, feelings at that age and stuff like that.
Making you feel shameful? The therapist?
Yeah.
What? Oh my
Yeah.
God. Okay, first of all, I want to back up here. Your parents had said, yes, we checked into it, and he said no.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not believing what you said if they're believing what he said.
Yeah.
They're not believing and trusting what's coming out of your mouth by saying, well, he said he didn't do it, so he didn't do it. I'm so sorry to come down on your parents right now on this situation, but I have no other recourse. It's disheartening to know that they just took what he said at face value. An abuser, just as a rule of thumb for people that don't know, aren't going to say, you know what, I did that.
Yeah.
Did that? Yes, I child endangerment. I left my kid in the car but I had the windows rolled down. An abuser is not going to confess what they do, or I raped somebody. They're not going to say, yes, I raped someone. They're not going to do that. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, but let's give your parents the benefit of the doubt. They should have just supported you. End of story. And the therapist, what kind of quack is this? I am so sorry, but he or she needs to get their license taken away. I don't understand. Let's move forward here. So he does not correct parents, doesn't say anything about, hey, why don't you give your child some support? How come you're not believing in your child? Anything of the sort. He wasn't doing this. And then he was trying to get your feelings out. He was trying to find out how you're feeling.
Yeah. Let me also say this. The initial reason they had me go to that therapist in the first place was because I had started acting out, and I had started, like, being disobeying and, like, talking back and all sort of stuff after I felt like they didn't believe me or whatnot. So he was more talking to me about, like, why are you acting out? What is this really about type thing, instead of, like, trying to go after the issue that started it. You know what I mean?
He wasn't getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
I'm trying to right now, and I don't even have a license.
Yeah.
Okay. He wasn't getting to the root of the problem, but he was just dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah.
But I feel like you need to get to the root of the problem to fix the aftermath, so then you can discontinue self-destruction.
Well, their whole thing was I should have moved on. I should just move on. They were trying to get me to move on from, because they're initially like, this happened. You can't do anything to change it. You might as well just move on type thing. But it's like, I'm at that age, like, even at, like, 10 years old, like, I still haven't fully moved on from it, and I'm 31.
You need to rip it off, rip the Band-Aid off, okay? Deal with the root of the problem. Get in there with some peroxide so we can start healing. You need to get to the root of the problem. And I don't understand. I don't even have a degree, an associate's degree, and I'm able to figure that out. It just doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out You need to get to the root of problems so you can heal and move forward eventually.
Yeah.
And then you have post-traumatic stress disorder or CPTSD. You need someone to talk to regarding it. At any rate, moving right along, you had a quack for a therapist.
Yeah.
Your parents weren't supporting you. Then they tricked you into this hellhole. You were just acting out. That was your that way of coping. They locked you up into this reform school. Was it Christian?
No, mine wasn't Christian, no.
Okay. What happened after this? Was it a director that was telling you you were at fault? You're to blame for the family issues, and that's why your parents sent you here. What happens next?
So initially they were just trying to make me feel shameful when I first got there that, you must have been a bad kid, and then when I got put in the family, because when you first get there, you get put into one of 4 families, and there was Honor, Quest, Respect, and Genesis, and I got put in the Honor family, and they buddy you up, they go over the rules, or they're supposed to go over the rules. I can't remember if they actually went over the rule manual. I more so think that they just gave me a packet and said, read this. You're going to want to educate yourself onto how this place works. So I got brought into the family, and so on each side of the cabin, there was like 30 kids on each side of the cabin. There was a big cabin. It was split into 2 down the middle. There'd be a door in the middle. There'd be 30 kids on each side. So 30 on one, 30 on the other. And then there'd be 30 on one, 30 on the other for one level up. So there'd be 2 levels to these cabins, if that makes sense. And
okay, so are the 30 students in one room, and then there's a separate room?
Yeah.
And it's divided? Okay. Yeah. Is there staff in that room? What's part of the family? Just all the students, or some staff inside the family?
So each family would have, I believe, 60 students total, and the family would be split up into those 2 sides. So the whole bottom would be Honor family, right? The top would be Quest, and then
any staff members inside where the students were, or no?
Okay, there was so for each family, excuse me. For each family, there was a family father, and they initially looked over every family. They ran the family every day. They told us when to get up, when to shower, all of that stuff, and they ran, up to 60 kids would be in charge, like by 2 adults and a bunch of junior staff who, once you get to level 4, you can become essentially a cop, and you call lower levels out on the rules. And yeah.
Clarify, these are students that reach a certain hierarchy level.
Yeah. That
are able to dictate, regulate other students. So they're supervising. They have a job without pay.
Yeah.
A job without pay. I noticed you said Genesis was part of the Bible, but nothing correlating with Christianity in this place. Yes.
Nothing that I really saw. It was like we didn't read Bibles, any of that type of stuff. Maybe like when it initially started, because I went there in January 23rd. I got there on January 23rd, 2007. So the place opened in, I think, like 2003 or something. So maybe it had more of a Christian aspect before my time. But I was there.
That was residue from before. Okay, moving right along. Would you say this was a boot camp-like structure?
Oh, yeah. Boot camp, there was rules against everything, points and levels system. You got what they called merits or demerits every day. Demerits means you lost points, got consequence. If you earn merits, which means you can't get any consequences in a day and earn merits on the same day. So you can't earn points if you get a consequence, in other words. So, but you
can't redeem yourself in one day.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't get consequence, you can earn like 24 points a day, I think.
Okay. So once you get a demerit, you can't redeem yourself in one day, but the next you can.
Yeah.
Would you say that the students were treated better once they get to a certain hierarchy level?
It depends On where they're at, but most of the time, yeah. Once you get into level 4.
Yeah. So what kind of kudos would they get? Benefits?
Okay, so when you get on level 4, you got to go down to lower facility, which initially is, you got to have your own cabins. There was more like 6 people per cabin. You'd have like 6 upper level students in one cabin, and you got to be on like your own facility. It was still part of the facility, but it was down below. And so you got to also have like trunks of food. You could have your parents send up food if you wanted, but there was a catch to that too, because if you got any category 3 or higher consequences in that week, you'd be on what they called probation. And if you ate any of your food, which would always be with you, by the way, so you'd always, like, if you were hungry, you'd just be looking at this crate of food, but you couldn't eat it. And if you did, you got a cat 4. You got a cat 4, which they'd say that you stole it from yourself, and then consequence.
My God, that's awful.
And so yeah, you got privileges. We also had like an Xbox in the main room down on lower facility. We had like an Xbox and a PlayStation we could play if we were not on probation. So if you got a category 3, you couldn't essentially do anything.
Were they looking for you to make a mistake? Was it easy to rack up demerits? And
yeah.
Were they lines? I will not use the bathroom in the middle of the night or something to that effect.
We didn't have lines on a regular facility, but they did have what they call study hall, which when you went in there, you'd essentially write sentences like, this is what I did, this is what I'm not going to do next time, this is what I'm going to do instead, and then just rewrite it over and over again.
So that is times. A written demerit. I will not do this mistake, and I will learn from this.
Well, we also had self-correction forms that we'd fill out every time we got a consequence, which you'd have to write what you did, why it's wrong, and what you're going to do next time. If you self-corrected, you'd have to fill that out. If you didn't say self-correct right off the bat, then they'd staff-correct it, which means you lost more points, and you'd have to write more. You'd have to go to study hall and write sentences about it.
Was there any isolation rooms?
Yeah. There was a place called the Hobbit, which was solitary confinement and isolation. There has a bunch of names, but they called it the Hobbit. And I spent 4 days in there one time.
My God.
And I thought that a few hours had gone by because of my you don't have any of the elements that you would get on outside, like the sunlight, none of that. You're not hearing anything. The rooms are padded. There's bars on the windows. The windows themselves are like glossed over with this like misty, I don't know what it's called. It's like a spray mist they mist the windows with, so you can't see what's outside. You just see white.
That's awesome.
And so I was in there for 4 days. What's up?
What if you had to use the restroom?
Oh, okay. So sometimes if you had a nice junior staff that you got cool with, they would take you. They would run you over to use the bathroom in one of the facilities. But if you had a junior staff or you were acting out a bunch, they'd just give you a bucket and tell you to go in there.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
And what about toilet paper? I'm just getting into details of everything. I just want the audience to paint a picture for the audience of what goes on in these places. Any toilet paper?
You got toilet paper if you weren't in intervention. If you were in an intervention, you might get like a sheet or 2 to use.
Wow. So as punishment, they're giving you limited toilet paper?
Yeah, you could get, it depends on the junior staff. I mean, it all depends really on the junior staff. If the junior staff doesn't like you, or you've been acting out with the junior staff or anything like that, they can short anything they want from you. Like,
refresh the audience memory that the junior staff are students. Is that correct?
Yeah, students that have attained level 4 or higher.
Right, they're students running the place.
Yeah.
So they're getting the children to do the dirty work for the
Yeah.
staff. And it's all orchestrated by the staff. I have to clarify this because a lot of people don't know what these worlds are like. Any force feedings, any force to eat your own vomit, were you timed to eat your food? And tell me about the food. What was the food like there?
Okay, so almost every morning we had oatmeal. Sorry, I have to take this off. It's getting too hot. Oatmeal almost every day except for Saturdays. Saturdays we got 2 pancakes. We got essentially they call them sausage or pigs in a blanket. So on Saturdays we got pigs in a blanket, and then on Sundays we had the best thing, like the entire. I love these, the breakfast burritos, which you had eggs, sausage, either sausage or bacon, usually sausage, and then they had, I think, like potatoes, and I think that was it, and cheese on them, and it was like one of the best things that they had there. But that was only on Sundays, and yeah, so that was breakfast, and then for lunches, I don't really remember. Most lunches we'd just get like a sandwich and like soup or something, and then dinner we'd have, it varied. We had spaghetti on one night. We had pizza on one night, what they called pizza boats, which were essentially like a half piece of French bread that was about that big, and then they put pizza toppings on the top of it. We had, what else did we have? We had like this beef stroganoff one night. I can't remember much of the other ones, but the food was all right. It wasn't great, but it wasn't like horrible. Some of the food I couldn't.
Starving you, so no starving.
No, well, at least not when I was there. I heard before my time they were starving people, and they did take your condiments. If you lost enough points, they take your condiments.
So for points that you would lose things.
Yeah.
Okay, but anything else?
No, nothing.
Okay, so that's good.
Well, if you underate or overate, then they would give you a self-infliction, which is a category 5. Like if you weren't eating enough, if they didn't think you were eating enough right, they'd give you a self-infliction, which is a category 5, which is self-inflicted injury. Because they think you're being bulimic or anorexic. Yeah.
Okay, so would they force feed them, or they would punish them they would punish you in another way?
They punish you with points. They take away a bunch of points. So a category 5 is the highest consequence level. So if you get a cat 5, it doesn't matter what level you're on, how many points you have, how many times you voted up. You go back to level 1, 0 points, and then you go straight into intervention too. So
overeating. So if they overate, is that wanting seconds, or what does that consist of? The overeating.
Okay, so if you were to trying to think of like a scenario.
Or were they picking on students that were overweight?
More picking on students that were overweight.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've never seen anybody vomit, have to eat their own vomit, force-fed, or anything like that, correct? I just want to know everything.
No, I don't remember seeing any of it. I think I might have heard of somebody being force-fed. Like if you flat out refuse to eat for like an extended period of time, I wouldn't put it past them to do it. Okay. I'm sure it happened, but I never saw it.
You never saw it. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can think of? What about using the restroom? Did you have to ask permission to use the restroom? You had to ask permission. Okay. Were there times where you couldn't use the restroom and you needed to use the restroom? Did they ever make you hold in your urine bowel movements? Tell me.
Yeah, like if we, usually it would happen like when we were out doing physical education, like if you had to go pee, they'd be like, oh, we have to wait until we go to dinner, or you have to wait until, like, you know, we're in the cabin next time. They wouldn't, the only way you could go to the bathroom is when you were at PE is if there was a runner that went by, and a runner is essentially an upper level student that, okay, so essentially when you're on the upper levels, sorry, there's so many different aspects to this.
What if I was sick? I just want to interject real quick. What if I was sick? I had to go to the bathroom. I'm in the middle of PE. What would happen to me? I'm sick. I can go to the bathroom.
If there wasn't a runner and you couldn't hold it, then you just have to go right there. Cool. And then you get consequence for doing that.
Okay, so I would have to go in my pants because they wouldn't allow me to do it.
Yeah.
Or if I just was human and went to the bathroom like a normal child.
Getting out of the area. You'd probably get an out of area, which is a category 4.
Would somebody try to tackle me?
Oh yeah. If you got an out of area, if you go past a certain point, they assume you're running and then they'll tackle you.
Oh my God.
You don't have permission. Yeah.
That is crazy. So tackling students for trying to go to the bathroom, that's just awful.
Yeah.
Holding in urine, holding in bowel movements until they tell you when to go. It's terrible. That's child abuse. Was there other students told to lower self-esteem? Did they pick on certain students, call them names, bully them? Were they encouraged to bully the students?
Okay, they weren't encouraged to bully the students, but I do know for a fact, after being on the upper levels and being on the lower levels for a long time, it does happen. Like, I know for a fact that before we go to work certain families, like, so they'd have like 4 junior staff per family per day. They would get designated to, okay, it's your day to work quest or whatnot, right? So there'd be 4 junior staff. And I remember multiple times me walking with, 2 or 3 other junior staff, and a couple of them being like, okay, today, that was hella funny how we picked on that one person last time. Let's pick on that same person again and see if we can't get him to break.
Oh my God.
And then, so it did happen. It didn't happen every day, but there were a few people that did that.
Staff saying that, or junior staff was saying that with your students?
I mean, it happened both ways. I've heard staff talk about it. Yeah.
So they were encouraging them. They were orchestrating it. The staff was orchestrating kids to bully other kids, in essence. Yes?
Not all staff members, but yeah, there were a couple. Yeah.
Was enough.
Yeah.
All it takes is one.
Yeah.
And then when other staff are abusing children and the other staff aren't saying anything about it, it's a whole culture here.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything about it. They're just turning a blind eye or participating themselves. And turning a blind eye, let's say you have a nice staff, but they see everything else that's going on, they're just as guilty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you ever try to run away from this place?
I didn't try and run away, but I know several people that did. And when you run, every staff member would have a radio on them, and then you just hear, "We got a runner," and then like all the junior staff that are on upper facility that day. So that could be anywhere from, like, when I was first there, like probably 100 junior staff, right, would be on upper facility a day or something like that. So you'd have all 100 junior staff and staff members, everybody running after you. And when they caught you, they would literally tackle, like, I'm talking like a 20-person tackle pile would happen. And you just get kicked, punched, like,
oh my God.
Completely just.
And punched for running away.
You'd get, like, people got broken ribs, broken legs, like, all sorts of shit happened. Sorry for swearing, but all sorts of stuff happened. When you tried to run, man, they made an example of you. That's why people don't run from there.
That's so awful.
Yeah. And
did they throw them into isolation in addition to kicking and beating the crap out of them?
Yeah, you went straight into isolation because they automatically assume that you're going to try and do it again.
How long were these kids in isolation? I know you were locked up for 4 days. What did you witness or hear?
When I was in isolation?
I know you were locked up for 4 days, right?
Yeah.
But what were kids in there longer than 4 days? Weeks, months? Do you know? Have you seen?
I heard about somebody being in there for a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks. That's awful.
It all just depended on if you, like, because they would ask you pretty much like every day, are you ready to come back to the family? Have you been in here long enough? And then if you were just like, screw this and no, screw that, because a lot of people would be like, would want to be in there, honestly, because it really sucked, but it was a break away from the family. And if you were getting bullied in the family, for example, like I was for a while in some of the families I was in, I didn't even want to go back. I didn't want to go back.
Oh my God, that's awful. Were they feeding the kids in here in this isolation? What was the food like in there? Different?
You get the same food that everybody else got, but you get the same food, but you'd have to wait until everybody else ate to get your food, because essentially they would make your plate last, right?
So nothing.
Yeah.
Fries. Yeah. That's awful. And anything else? Is this like a dark closet, the room of isolation?
It's a room, so the place is a cabin. You walk in, there's 3 different like room things, and each room you go in, the doors close behind you. There's padding on the walls. There's like spray painted windows so you can't see outside, and then the windows have bars on them, and there's nothing in there. There's just a room. It's a padded room.
Fire hazard. You do realize that's a fire hazard. Bars on the window.
It's a fire hazard.
A fire. And everybody's running to get out. forget it, and they forget the kid in isolation. Or maybe they can't get to the kid in isolation because there's smoke everywhere. All right?
Yeah.
Now you've got a kid behind bars in isolation trapped. Is this school still open?
No, it got shut down. I was the last person to graduate before it got shut down.
Last person. Okay. I'm surprised they didn't get them for not being fire code compliant. I'm very surprised about that. At any rate, I would like to get Agape boarding school closed down just on that alone, because child abuse and gang rape isn't enough. Back to this isolation, bars on the window. You have a bucket. You're lucky if a staff can take you to the bathroom. You're in there for days. That one child was in there for 2 weeks. That's just awful. Anything to occupy yourself in there. Do they give you books? Do they give you something to write? What happens? Are you listening to anything? Can you listen to anything?
I think that I can't really remember fully, but I think sometimes they bring in educational tapes for you to listen to, like self-help, quote unquote, their version of self-help tapes. But then other than that, I think you just had to sit in there and think about what you did. Which if you didn't do anything really, like if you got an out of area for going to, for example, if you were playing basketball on the court during PE and you didn't ask to go fetch a ball that went outside the line that you can't cross, right? You get an out of area for that. If you didn't raise your hand and say, hey, can I go get that ball?
So these are minor infractions. I mean, actually, it's just absurd. It's absurd. I know someone who was locked in the isolation for 2 weeks that forgot her pencil in my school that I was locked in. And that's awful, just for forgetting a pencil. And did you feel like you were always on eggshells in this place? Oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up any minute now.
So for my first year there, I rebelled completely. My first year there, I was getting removed every single day. People knew me by name on a facility because of how many times they'd be like, oh, there goes Jordan again, getting removed. It's about time. I'd have people being like, oh, he actually made it pretty far today without getting removed. But yeah, they had, wait a minute, what was it? Oh yeah. What was the question again? You were asking about.
That's okay. I was asking about the minor infractions.
Oh yeah.
I know that they punish these kids for getting a pencil, or like you said, just going from out of bounds.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous because they're afraid you're going to run.
Oh yeah, walking on eggshells is what you were saying.
Walking on eggshells all the time. It was almost like there were mines everywhere, ready to go off.
Yeah, so when I was there for the first year, yeah, definitely walking on eggshells because, it felt like no matter what I did, I would get removed for something. Or no matter what I did, I would lose all my points. And then I'd just be like, screw it. Why should I even try if I already have lost all my points for the day and I'm already at level 10 points? Why should I even care?
Why should you try?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, that these places are supposed to build self-esteem. They're not building self-esteem here. Basically, they're having kids on edge, and it's a reinforcement that they're bad every day. It's reinforcing you that you're a bad child. You're messing up. You're a screw up every day. It's almost like they're setting you up for failure. Would you say?
Yeah, if you they'd say if you're not working your program and you're choosing to act like a child, we'll treat you like a child. That's literally what they did. If you were level 10 points, you got viewed as the outcast of the facility. You couldn't talk to anybody either. If you were level 1, you could only talk to level 3 or higher. And most
yes.
Yeah, so anybody, which I kind of understand, I don't agree with it, but they're trying to make sure that lower levels don't talk to lower levels, level 10 points don't talk to level 10 points, because since they both don't get a fuck, they could plan something together. That was their whole thing. That was why they did that. But at the same time, it made you feel really alone, because the majority of the time that there were 3 and 3 stars and level 4 and higher students were the junior staff, or people that were about to be junior staff that probably wouldn't even want to talk to a level 1, because the level 1's not working their program. And the level 3 is working their program. That quote unquote suspicious, lower level BS. So most of the time they wouldn't talk to you.
They're already starting that. They don't trust the children at the get-go. And as a teenager, you want to feel trustworthy. You want to feel good about yourself. I wanted to talk to you about, there was a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. So tell me, Jordan, what was the communication like, or the lack thereof, in this place? Could you make a phone call to anybody? Was it monitored? Did you have to write your parents? Could you write anybody else? Could you talk to an attorney? What was the communication, or the lack thereof, like in this program?
Okay, so you could 60 days you had to wait after you got there to get your first phone call. But there was a catch. If you were level 1, 0 points, and they didn't feel like you were ready to have your first phone call, you'd have to wait even longer. So in my case, I didn't get my first phone call until 90 days after. And all the letters are read, and unless if you know one of the staff, like the family fathers that runs the family, and you're on good terms with them, you can probably get them to get away with, like, not just honestly glancing over your letter, like just look down for a second and just say, okay, you're good. But if they didn't like you, or they thought you were screwing around, they'd actually read your letter word for word. And if they saw any manipulation in there, they'd make you rewrite it and rip it up.
And what you mean by manipulation is, Mom, we're being abused in here. Mom, Dad, get me out of here. They're being abusive in here. It's not good.
Yeah, and essentially telling the truth.
What's going on? If you told the truth, you would get punished for it, and maybe even isolation for days or weeks. So tell me, could you talk to anybody from the outside world? Could you write a letter to somebody else other than your parents?
When I was there, if the friend you wanted to write to on the outside, or whoever it was approved by your family rep and by your parents as a working friend, which means that they're not doing anything shady in their life. For example, they have a job. They don't do anything shady. They don't do drugs. They're like a stand-up person, and your family and the family rep agree with that. Then you can write them letters. Like in my case, I got to write my friend Tony in there, and like 2 other people I got to write. But I never got a response from except one person. But most people, essentially, if your parents weren't on your side like mine were, like, you're probably not going to get any approved friends on your family rep's list.
You can't even tell the truth. You can't even.
Well, you can't. No. So it's really artificial conversation.
It's focus.
Yeah.
Communication. Any phone calls? Could you make phone calls?
Not
monitor. No phone calls.
Except for 90 days after you get, 60 to 90 days after you get there, depending on what you're doing in your program, you get your first phone call. Then when you get level 3, you get a phone call every month. And then
you know why they wait so long, right?
Why?
Brainwashing.
Oh yeah, brainwashing.
They want you to be brainwashed and conditioned that you can't say anything about what's going on in these programs, and that you truly believe at this point that you're a bad kid.
Yeah.
And you're on that zombie-like state of, I'm a bad kid. If I say anything disrespectful about this program, I'm going to go down the totem pole on the hierarchy level.
Well, yeah, and you lose your points too. You lose the respect of your peers. Everybody will think you're just a manipulating, lying, Now
you're going to get picked on by everyone. Yeah. It's a whole culture in here. So those who have not experienced this, I really get in there and dig, because I want everyone to feel how we felt in these places. I want them to understand that this is still going on today, and we need to close these schools down because this culture is still going on. Is it fair to say that these programs are systemic? Is it fair to say, Jordan, that these boot camps for kids, wilderness camps, rehabilitation programs, conversion therapies, and you get the idea, the troubled teen industry, systemic programs?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And everything about them is.
Would you say a lot of brainwashing is going on versus how you felt before you got into this program and then after. Did you feel that you were the worst kid in the world? You caused your family problems. You were isolated to being the bad seed. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, definitely. And I would argue also that there is not only brainwashing, but hints of MK Ultra and Monarch programming in there as well as probably some beta kitten programming as well.
Do you want to get into the Monarch programming?
Okay, let's start with MK Ultra. MK Ultra was a set of experiments that the CIA did back in the 60s, where they, among other things, would dose people unwillingly with LSD and then monitor them and see how they acted. And they were unwilling participants in this, and that so they were doing a bunch of experiments with the brain and whatnot, and trying to find a way that they could control people, break people down, and build them back up type of mentality. Monarch is essentially, how do I describe this in like a layman's terms? Essentially, it's the branch that MK Ultra has evolved into. It's one form of brainwashing that they use. The monarch butterfly starts in a cocoon, and then it bursts into a butterfly. There's a whole system to that. It goes along with breaking people down, building them back up into the image of what you want them to be. Beta kitten programming is essentially taking a really young girl, programming her in a really grotesque way, like loving her and all of that, and then bringing a puppy in one day and cutting its head off in front of them and permanently traumatizing them at a young age. So then they're broken, and then they're built back up to be women of espionage for the CIA, to go on covert missions to find out secrets from people. They activate this programming so this programming is instilled in the woman or the man from a young age, and then because of that, they're able to activate this certain form of them to come out and to operate certain espionage roles later on in life, to do certain things for the CIA, for people in power. So this has actually been proven. It's a subject that they don't like you talking about.
Right.
So I don't really want to talk too much about it, but
mind manipulation. They're like puppets at that point.
Oh yeah.
Control. They're being controlled by someone else's hard drive, and they're just
exactly.
And they're just a dummy terminal.
Yeah.
And it's so sad. So sad. Would you say there was some Stockholm syndrome going on with this place after a while, sticking up for the abusers? Did you ever do that? Did you ever see any other children doing that, promoting the program afterwards, thinking this is the best thing that ever happened to them, got them off drugs, gave them a new start? Did you hear a lot of that marketing going on?
Yeah, I've heard both sides of it. I've seen and heard people that, praise the program, but there's also, in my opinion, two sides to it, because like if you were forced to graduate like I was and spent, X amount of time to graduate, you were forced to see all the different aspects of these programs. So for example, I got to see the little itty bitty bits of wisdom here and there. And I'm talking itty bitty bits, like scattered throughout. Most of it was bullshit. Most of it was brainwashing. But in between, that's why the brainwashing works so well, is because there's notes of truth to it. There's notes of things that actually work and can be applied to life, in my opinion. So, but they're very few and far between. So for somebody like me, I don't praise the program, but I will say that there are bits of wisdom that I gained from it. But I have seen people praise the program that are completely like robots, that have been in the program so long that the program is them. And that's what they're trying to do in places like this.
I think with you, quite frankly, you just made lemonade out of a bunch of lemons.
Yeah.
I think you're just an optimistic person, and you're taking what was given to you, and you had used it as a tool to make your life greater today. That's how I see it. But you do acknowledge, I know for a fact you acknowledge that this is not good behavior. This is abusive. This is against the law. This is not right to do to children. But yet you took what was given to you and you're using it for the greater good today because of your choices.
But there definitely are people, too, that I know that went through the program, graduated, and still think it's the best thing that ever happened to them and that it's saved them from drugs. I've definitely heard that.
Yeah, it's so sad. Anything that you want to talk to parents about on red flags? Can you tell me, let's go back to the visits, how often or infrequent did your parents visit you? And how long were you there? You went in at 16. When did you get out?
I was there 22 months, and I rebelled for the first 12 months. You get to see your parents for the first time at PC1, and the seminars go at least for me, they went orientation, discovery, focus, principles, PC1, and then you went to keys, and you had to do 5 keys seminars, and then you went to PC2, and then you went to PC3, and then you did Trail of Lights, and then you graduated. So the first time you see your parents is at PC1, and that's probably, if you have a perfect program, probably a year. Or no, not that long, because you could have a perfect program and actually graduate in a year. So probably like half a year in, if you're having a perfect program, you go to PC1, so about 6 months in, and then that's the first time you get to see your parents.
You didn't see your parents for 6 months?
At least, no, me, it was longer. I didn't get to see my parents for like 13 months or so.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time for me.
Tell me, Jordan, how is that mending families back together again? How is that fixing families?
Well, I can tell
your child for a long period of time. Even 6 months is a long period of time. How is that working a relationship? And how are you working a relationship if you can't say whatever is on your mind in a letter?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that what they said, why they said that they were doing that. The reason they said that they were doing that is because while you're going through these seminars, your parents are supposed to be going through these seminars as well. The same seminars, supposedly.
Oh, no.
So your parents...
brainwashing the parents.
Yeah, it's happening on both sides.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why it works so well, is because they're brainwashing both sides.
And they're watching the seminars without you, right?
Yeah.
Without you.
They're doing the seminars
having a whole
on the
family
outside.
dynamic. You're watching the seminar and they're watching the seminar.
Yeah.
And no communication.
Nope. So when you both see each other, you're both roboticized. At least my parent, like, I wasn't as roboticized because I'd rebelled for so long, and then I was like, I'm kind of just going to do whatever they need me to do to get the F out of here.
Good for you, honey.
But my parents were completely robotized.
I believe you.
They were like, oh, you're in your image, you're running your old patterns and talking like program lingo.
The reason why I believe you is the mere fact that I went through it. I said, this is wrong, this is child abuse, these people are crazy, to I'm a bad kid, I'm the screw up. It's my fault about the rape. I was a robot.
Yeah.
And first, I carried everything. As eventually, that's what happened to you. It got to you. Eventually, they get to you.
Oh, yeah, eventually they do something. For me, it was almost getting sent to Jamaica. They threatened me with getting sent to Tranquility Bay in Jamaica, where they don't have child protection laws.
Oh, my God.
And from what I hear, they hate Americans.
For the audience who doesn't know, if you think it's this bad in the U.S.,
yeah,
even tenfold over there, although there have been camps, a lot of camps, especially now at Agape, that are just as bad as out of the country. So I can't really say that. Agape's one of them. And through Bethany, it was like a serial killer's dungeon, what they were doing to those kids. But at any rate, so sad. I'm so sorry. And you got out of it. Because why? Because you complied eventually?
Well, when they threatened me with that, and I actually realized that it was actually like a real thing and that actually it was getting really close to happening, because what they told me is that you can either work your program. This is exactly what they said. They said, Jordan, you can either continue to screw around and we'll send you, and do what you're doing, right? Or you can work your program, but if you don't, we're going to send you to Jamaica, and we're not even going to tell your parents until you're there. We're just going to tell them we sent you. They told me that they would not even tell my parents or ask them if they could send me there. They literally...
They can't do that.
Well, I know that they would have. They would have.
I believe you, because these people are nuts. That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's how I was like, okay, I'll do whatever you say.
They tell your parents just to get themselves out of legalities.
Yeah.
But your parents are so brainwashed at this point that they would probably think it was for the greater good.
Well, they probably just make up a story like I flipped out or I tried to run and they restrained me and they couldn't get a whole control of me or some BS like that. And then they'd be like, so we shipped him off to Jamaica because we can't have him on the facility.
It's a typical story. It's a typical story of what goes on behind these closed doors. And it's so sad that these parents just eat it all up. And we're trying to tell the parents, this is what goes on behind closed doors. They are brainwashing you. They're brainwashing the kids. It's really sad. And they're getting away with it.
Yeah, people need to understand that when you sign those papers, you're signing away all of your rights. Exactly. All of them.
Exactly.
Every single last one of them you're signing away.
Because you're signing over the guardianship. So legally, because the parents had signed over the guardianship, they could have sent you out of the country.
Yeah, they could have. My parents would have been pissed, but they couldn't do anything.
They just signed over guardianship. I mean, I'm not an attorney or anything, but legally, I'm thinking maybe yes, even out of the country. Oh
yeah. Well, definitely, because they're all under the W.A.S.P umbrella. They'd just be like, oh, it's just another quote-unquote accredited school under the W.A.S.P umbrella. You know, they'd say some BS like that.
So another U.S. school.
Yeah.
In another country.
Yeah. And
that's how they would get away with it.
Something like that.
And parents signing the guardianship.
Yeah. There's so much fine print in these documents, too. That's also, parents out there, if you're going to do something like this, please don't. But if you're going to research these places, don't sign away your rights. And if you're going to sign the paper, make sure you read every single last line of fine print. Because it's going to be somewhere in there that you're signing away all your rights. I can almost guarantee it.
And if you can't just drop in at a school at a whim, unexpectedly, a surprise visit, they're hiding something.
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't even put up with that for one day. If you can't just drop in on your kid or want to take him out, or they're giving you a hard time of taking him out because they want the money.
Yeah.
Parents need to really look at these red flags. If you can't if you cannot communicate, if there's things crossed out in letters, if you can't just drop in on a whim, if you can't pick up the phone and call your kid at any given time, there's something wrong. And if you have a 1% chance that any of this could happen to your child, why take the risk? And you need to think outside the box. It's your responsibility as a parent to think outside the box. I don't care if whatever you did doesn't work. Don't put your child in someone else's hands. Don't put your child in someone else's hands expecting that they're not going to be mistreated.
Well, yeah, and if you can't get through to your child as their parent, what makes you think somebody that doesn't know them at all, somewhere in another state or country, is going to get through to them?
I'm laughing because that is the truth. That is the truth. And if they are complying, it's because they're probably being abused.
Well, yeah, they're being forced into it.
Should we talk about your best experience, your worst experience, and what you're doing today to cope with the aftermath? Okay.
Yeah, so best experience, I'll do the best first. Just staffing seminars, getting onto the upper levels and realizing that I don't have to be like everybody else, and actually taking people under my wing that would get picked on, and consequencing. So I just would turn it around on the other junior staff. I'd be like, if I heard him saying we're going to pick on somebody today, I'd be like, cool. Every time I see you do that, I'm going to give you staffed cat 3 then. How's that? Just every time you do that, I'll just give you, and then when they get 3 staffed cat 3s, you get a cat 4 in subordination. So then it's just like, you just lost all your points. You're no longer junior staff. Bye-bye. I just do that to them. So I took people under my wing when I got on the upper levels. Having rebelled for 12 months, I knew what it was like to be on lower levels, get picked on every single day, and literally feel like you can't get anywhere in the program. So I would coach people. I have this one person in particular that was Russian. I don't want to say his name, but because of his accent mainly, he'd get picked on, and people would make fun of him in the family, and junior staff would pick on him and target him.
And again, this is supposed to help build self-esteem. I'm throwing this out there because that's how they advertise it and pitch him on the website. Carry on. I'm sorry. He got picked on for his accent. And what?
Yeah, so I would take people like him under my wing, and I'd be like, look, just stay close by me today, and, I'll make sure, people don't pick on you, and, you're not going to get picked on when I'm in the family, and if you need anybody to talk to, I'm here, type thing. And then also, I would consequence people, right, that were flat out like, if you were straight up disrespectful to me personally, I would give you a consequence, because that's just, I'm not going to tolerate that. But if you were just for example, if we did basket searches and I found something, I'm going to give you the lowest consequence possible so you can still gain a little bit of points. And I'm also at the end of the day, I would write down consequences and I would call them out to show up for the staff members and look like, hey, I'm doing something. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But really over here, at the end of the day, I'm coaching them instead of giving them a consequence. I'd be like, okay, so you realize what you did and why I consequenced you, right? And they'd be like, yeah, I know I shouldn't have done that. I'd be like, cool. So now that I've talked to you about it, I'm not going to give you the consequence because there's no point. I've already talked to you about it. You're not going to do it again, right? And they're like, no. And then I just won't give them the consequence. Or I'll give them the lower consequence, like a category 1, so they only lose 5 points. Oh. And I'll be like, just don't do it again. So I took...
That strategy worked.
Yeah.
I bet that worked.
Yeah, it worked.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you're a kid.
Yeah.
Doing this. Okay, so I want to ask you this question. How many of these adults in this running these programs in your program had a license?
That I don't know.
And was your place licensed at all?
I don't know the answer to that either. I don't know if it was licensed.
No. My guess is it was unlicensed
Oh
facility.
yeah, I think it was unlicensed. I just don't know for sure either way.
Surprise, there are licensed, meaning they're regulated by the state and the state's not regulating them.
It might have been regulated though because...
But I have a feeling because it's in Montana, that's why I'm gearing towards this, that it is unlicensed.
Yeah, or it is licensed, and because a lot of these schools picked Montana, right, because of their lack of regulation. So it could also just be licensed, but they have such a lack of regulation there, where there's a catch-22 blind spot, where they can pretty much get away with anything.
Let's do some research. I'm going to look up and see if this particular school was licensed or not.
Okay.
And I'll see if there's any media attention on not being fire code compliant, because that's scary. Yeah. I mean, I know they're closed now, but there's still WASP schools out there. It's a WASP school? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. What does that stand for the audience that doesn't know?
Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs in Schools. And
they still exist today. Is that correct?
Either they still exist today under that same moniker, or they've rebranded into a different moniker, but they're still the same thing, just different name.
We need to voice that on the show. And I would like to do research and see if it was an unlicensed facility.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a good thing that came out of the school. What was the worst thing?
Worst thing was probably being in intervention for 4 days and just getting removed every day and feeling hopeless. And yeah. And then dropping. Oh yeah, there was a bunch of drops that I had. I tried to kill myself. I broke one of the metal pieces on my lanyard and tried to cut my wrist. And then I got a category 5 and I got sent to intervention. That wasn't any fun. That was when I was in there for 4 days.
I have to stop you right there. I'm glad you're bringing this up. This kid just tried to commit suicide. Was there any medical attention? Was there a therapist to help you? You get thrown into isolation?
Yeah.
Medical attention? No therapist to help you? What happened?
They after that happened, they asked my parents if they were willing to pay an extra like $500 a month to get a therapist that probably wasn't even licensed. I'm not sure. She was all right. She was a decent therapist, but she really I think she had the wool pulled over her eyes. Honestly, her name was Jean, but I think she had the wool pulled over her eyes because from what I experienced and saw when I was in session with her, I don't think she knew what actually was going on the facility.
Did you try to cut your wrist? Was there blood coming out? What happened? Did you need?
I cut my wrist enough for there to be marks. There's still visible marks to this day.
Take you to the doctor after that?
No.
Were you given any medical attention?
No, they just took me to isolation. They had me removed.
They should have at least had somebody look at it. What if it got infected? What if you needed stitches? You know, I still think that a medical doctor should have looked at that. And this is what I'm trying to convey to the audience. They just threw him in isolation, which is even worse for your self-esteem on a mental level. Forget about the physical. Forget about this could have been infected. He could have needed sutures. They just threw him in isolation. So now he's away from everybody. He's alienated. And you already feel like you're a bad person when you're trying to kill yourself. That's why you're killing yourself, because you feel unloved, unworthy. You want to check out because you just don't feel loved by humans anymore.
And I just hated it there. I just fucking hated it there.
And you wanted to escape from this place. And so what did they do? They threw him in isolation, which is even worse. So I want to paint a picture of how horrible this place is, and these places that do exist today, the ones that have been rebranded, the W.W.A.S.P programs that have been rebranded. It's terrible. So sorry that you had to go through. How long was that the time when you were there for 4 days?
What was that?
Was that the time is that why you were there for 4 days? They locked you in there for 4 days?
Yeah, that was the 4-day one, yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's awful. I'm so sorry. That is just despicable that they did that to you. Oh my God. I didn't realize it was because of a suicide attack. Oh my God. I'm sorry. And audience, you just have to realize that this is happening today. Maybe not that same program, but there are other programs. There's over 100,000 of these camps here in the U.S. alone that are abusing our children, just like this. They're all the same theme and getting away with all kinds of things, including gang rape, starvation, beating the kids. Agape boarding school is still open today.
Not only that, they're getting F loads of money from this.
Yes, exactly. $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
And who is feeding it? The parents are feeding it, and some are nonprofit organization churches are feeding it. Anything else? Government. The government, they could be state regulated. Provo Canyon was state regulated, but they weren't doing their job. I shouldn't say is. They're still open today.
Yeah.
So, but Paris Hilton bringing that to light, nothing is being done about that school. No one is prosecuted. No one was prosecuted at the camp you were sent to, correct?
I don't believe anybody was prosecuted. I don't believe anybody was prosecuted. No. I know there was a bunch of cases. I know there was. I think I read an article the other day that had said like 528 plaintiffs or something.
Oh wow.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Starting W.W.A.S.P school.
No, that was just Spring Creek.
That was Spring Creek Lodge Academy.
It's like something like 528 plaintiffs. Yeah.
Holy smokes! I'm going to look up all the social, everything on social media that has gotten media attention, and the newspaper regarding this, and I will.
They've tried really hard to keep this so hush hush. Like, there's only one documentary online about Spring Creek Lodge Academy, and that's called "Who's Watching the Kids," and that's the only documentary, like official documentary, that's ever been done about the place. And other than that, it's really hard to even find pictures of this place before it was, because now it's an Airbnb. They made it an Airbnb now. Yeah, so they really tried to keep it hush hush.
Wow, that's
so don't be surprised if you don't find that much stuff. I'm just saying, like, they really tried to keep it hush hush. But please, anything you do find, expose that.
Yes, I'm going to take some stills of the articles and incorporate them into this video.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to tell the parents, and anything you want to talk about what you're doing today as an activist in detail?
Anything I want to tell the parents, just research these places. Don't sign on the dotted line at least until you have read all of the fine print, because there'll probably be you signing all of your rights away in there somewhere. And I have 13 months off of meth and heroin and counting. And so once I got off the hard drugs, I decided that I wanted to put my energy into something positive to help people. So I made the Straight Outta BS podcast, and I'm having people on to share their experiences in an unbiased, unfiltered way. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing for activism. And I make music too. And yeah, that's what I'm doing.
What I would like to do is play some of your music at the end. That would be lovely.
I think I have 2 videos done, my first 2 videos done on TikTok, just broken up into like the best parts segment thingies. So yeah, you can check me out on TikTok too.
Can I ask you a question? And I think this will help people that are coping with the aftermath of any kind of abuse or trauma, and they resort to heroin and meth or any other substance. How did you get off? How did you get out? Did you go to a program, a rehabilitation program? How did you get help?
Okay, so that's kind of a story, but yeah, I'll tell you. So I was using meth and heroin for quite a while, like years, and I met this girl, and we got into like this friends with benefits kind of relationship, so we were both using together, and it got to a point where I was homeless and I had like nowhere else to turn. And so at first I was kind of just like, I called my mom and I was like, oh, I want your help. And she's like, okay, we have to go to rehab to get my help. And so at first I was like, okay, I'm doing this for my mom. So I went to rehab, and they actually had incorporated a couple of the processes from some of the seminars that I had been in the program there. So I ended up walking out of those. And also just the whole thing of being in rehab, like the structure and like the rules and the paperwork and the homework and all of it, like, just felt like I was in Spring Creek again. And so I ended up graduating from the rehab, but I just want to point that out, that this whole like structure and all of the way they do things with the levels and the points and the privileges, like it's drained into the rehab centers now. I just want to point that out. So I went to rehab.
See PTSD there.
Well, yeah, I was dealing with PTSD and anxiety a lot there, and people were like, dude, just chill. And I'm like, no, bro, you don't understand. Like, I was forced against my will to go to this place, and like this place reminds me of this place.
I get that because I'm a survivor. So
yeah, so
terrible.
I went to rehab, got out of rehab, graduated from rehab, and then came home and I'm currently on methadone. I'm on methadone and I smoke weed, but that's my sobriety. That's what I consider sober. It's about harm reduction. It's about harm reduction in my eyes. I'm working on getting off methadone because I don't want to be on it. It's just another ball and chain. But so I got out of rehab, got straight on methadone, and just never did meth and heroin again. And I'm sober to this day off of that. So
congratulations.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
And also that you persevered through something dark because you were experiencing CPTSD because it was all of these associations of the structure, but you punched through it anyway because you knew you needed help and you needed a better life.
Well, also I knew it could be a whole lot worse too.
Yes, it could have been a whole lot worse. So I'm so happy. I mean, you could have died. You could have gone to prison. Who knows what? So I'm so happy.
In a facility again like SpringCreekLodgeAcademy where I couldn't leave. At least I could leave there if I wanted to.
Right, exactly. You went there voluntarily.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of you. And how long has it been again? I'm so sorry.
13 months.
13 months. Congratulations. That's awesome. And now you're putting all this energy, which is so positive, to help other survivors, but you really do need to balance.
Yeah.
To do some self-care. And also I want to talk to you about a fundraiser for you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
We need to do that. Do you have one yet or not yet?
No, I don't.
Okay. We need a fundraiser for you. Let's get that going. Can I announce it on the show or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you okay with that? So right now you're having a hard time financially, and we want to help our survivor brother out. And I want to put together a fundraiser for you, and a little goes a long way. I know times are tough right now, but if we just, I don't care if it's $5, $1, whatever, $10, it all adds up. And if we could just pull together to help our survivor brother, and he's doing so much for other survivors. He's interviewing them, and I want to get the word out and help get these places closed down by exposing. And even if a survivor had their place closed down, it doesn't matter. There are places like this that exist today. There's over 100,000 of these camps. So we'll do a GoFundMe.
And that's just in the United States. We don't even know what's going on in other countries.
Right. It is definitely an international problem, but we're just focusing on the United States now. Right? It's so sad. Anything else you want to add, Jordan? Or?
Not that I can think of. No, just thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It was such an honor to be able to have you on Pieces of Victory, and I love what you're doing for survivors. Thank you so much, and I'm so glad I met you. You have turned into a wonderful young man, and it's just going to be positive from here on out. It sounds like you rebuilt sort of a relationship with your mom.
Yeah, me and my mom are on good terms now. She helps me financially too, but there's only so much my parents can do. I will admit that sending me to that program really did a number on their bank account, whether they want to admit it or not, because I've seen the numbers, and it's just that. Let me just say, I could have spent 3 years at Harvard for the amount of money they spent there 22 months. So that could have been my college degree. That could have been a lot of things. And I'm not saying, like, if my parents watch this, I'm not saying that you're bad for doing it. I wish you would went a different route. Right. I know that you had the wool pulled over your eyes a lot too. Obviously, you weren't in the same place as me. You didn't witness the same things that I did. You didn't have to go through all of that. So how would you know? But I want you to know that, so my parents can only help so much financially. And that's, that's kind of, also, this is my first time being away from my house by myself. I've always lived with my parents. So this is like my first time living by myself and like being like, trying to be like as independent as I can. So.
Oh, well, it sounds like you're on the right track, and we'll see what we can do to help you. Facilitate to the next level, because I feel like this journey that you're on this is your path. This is your mission in life. You just need to balance.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's taxing.
Yeah.
And you'll find a way.
Yep.
You're on a great path right now at night. And we'll always keep in touch, and we'll always support each other. And thank you so much for being in my life. Thank you so much, Jordan, for being on the show Pieces of Victory and being brave enough to tell your story of what really goes on behind closed doors in lockdown residential programs. Parents, if you have a 1% chance that this could happen to your child, why would you take that risk? My name is Jeneen Miller, And this is Pieces of Victory.